First keynoter is Robby Robson, and he's the Chief Science Officer and founder of eduworks.com. Started this, I don't know how long ago. It seems to me it's 5-10 years ago, a long time. What is it, Robby?
Oh, actually, EduWorks started before that.
Before, I know it's been forever almost.
It's been around a while.
Cool. Okay, and he's going to provide a talk on aligning curricula with skills and jobs.
Okay, and I am going to try, if I can successfully do this, to share this one. Okay, so is this working in terms of seeing the slide?
You're good.
Okay, excellent. Thanks so much. So as Bev said, thank you, Bev. I'm Robby Robson. I'm the Chief Science Officer, co-founder of EduWorks, until relatively recently the CEO, and I'm happy not to be anymore, so that's great. And I'd also like to point out that the work that I'm going to present here is really quite a large team effort, as is most things in industry, by the way. So I'll just make that comment aside. Okay. So I'm going to talk about SkillSync, and SkillSync I think is particularly relevant to this because it is it's a convergence accelerator project. We were among the guinea pigs, the very first track in the convergence accelerator. I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but I usually introduce this by pointing out that this is a very exciting and somewhat unusual National Science Foundation program that's really focused on translational research and societal impact. So as with most things, and I mentioned there's a lot of partners there, we are working in the workforce and in the talent pipeline. And our mission, which is rather lofty and global in nature, is efficient and effective and equitable skilling of the America's workforce. We have a tagline, which is connecting companies to colleges at the speed of business. And I'm going to talk about what we're doing within that and then explain a little bit of how we're doing that. But I just want to point out the sort of constellation of partners we have. In particular, Bev was talking about big data. So the National Labor Exchange there, which is run by, which is actually a collaboration between NASWA, which is the National Association of State Workforce Agencies and Direct Employers, gives us a database of millions of job applications that are current, et cetera. We're also working with things like the Business Higher Education Forum, Credential Engine, and we've just actually launched the project to apply some of this work to the T3 Innovation Network as well, and there's some other partners. Okay, so what is SkillSync? So, we set out to fix the America's talent pipeline. That's just a slightly boil the ocean problem, and rather than do that, we're just trying to boil a Great Lake. And so what we're trying to do is to figure out how we can leverage the trillions of dollars that have been invested in higher education. And by higher education, I mean the entire spectrum of higher education, from technical and community colleges, et cetera, and use those to help companies access those so that they can reskill and upskill workers. And I'm not going to go through all the statistics, but it's a huge problem in the US. So what we've done is we've built an application. And what the application does is it allows companies to specify training needs and build what we call training requests. And these are all skills-based. There's various AI behind this, which is mostly what I'm going to talk about. And what it does is it then allows colleges, and by colleges we really mean mostly at this stage the non-degree and programs, not necessarily long-term stuff, to align their courses, we call them, but really these courses are often just like 3-hour courses, they're in person, et cetera, with these requests, and to create a proposal that then hopefully gets accepted, and so forth. Now, it turns out that a lot of the applications that we're seeing now, and a lot of the demand for this, is in slightly other areas, but I'm going to go through this and to explain how this works. So underneath this, there's a set of AI services, and this is what I think is going to end up being, in some sense, the most important thing, especially for moving forward for this kind of workshop. And these AI services are independent. They're accessed through application programming interfaces, so they can be used by other applications as well. They're currently being used by SkillSync, and there's a set of them there. They range from extracting KSAs, we call them, knowledge, skills, abilities, attitudes. The A is a bit ambiguous. And from unstructured text, we have the problem of somebody just throws in a job title. What are the skills associated with that, which is a huge problem. And there's some other things there, like removing company identifiable information. When you work in the commercial world, for example, companies don't want their data publicized. Sometimes they think it's competitive, and they don't want that out there. There's also some other things. I think Christides on, and I think you're on the ALO Institute board, and Ashok Goel and his group was contributing something called Ask Jill, which is sort of independent, but was built into the application. But what I really want to talk about is this third one, which is an alignment service that scores the alignment between a set of KSAs, a prioritized set of KSAs, and course materials. And just to give you a feel, I usually show a video and do a demo. We have somewhat limited time. I put together kind of some slides to show you how this works. So this is the SkillSync application. And there's two sides to it. There's a company side where companies get to go in and create these training requests. So as part of that, they can search through skills. They can search through ONET frameworks. There's a lot of skills frameworks that are in here. And they can also drop in a job description, and we'll suggest some skills based on that job description using some of the underlying natural language understanding technology. This is the college side. And so what's happened here is that let's say a professional development or continuing education department has received a request from a company, and what they have down here on the right, you can see, is a bunch of training objectives. Okay, and what they're trying to do is to figure out what courses they have. This is from Hudson Valley Community College. So this is one of the pilots we ran. This was paired with a company called Global Foundries, which is a chip manufacturer, and they were interested in finding courses that fulfilled certain criteria, these training objectives. So they're looking at searching through courses, and there's a score here, which is we call an alignment score. It's sometimes called a percentage. That's another interesting story. Happy to tell you later about what happens when you with focus groups and what customers want as opposed to what you thought they want. But we have this as points here. And what this is saying is that if we add this particular course to a program, that this will raise our score by 67 points. And you can see that this alignment score is shown down here. This is the training opportunity. There's data on that. And one of the things we discovered, by the way, was that there is very little data on these things at colleges of the kind we're talking to. So we had to solve that problem as well. And you can see that it covers some of the training objectives. They can then further search further things to find others. And this will presumably raise it all the way up to 100 if they add this particular course. And having done that, they have sort of the core of a training program that they can offer. You'll notice there's a lot of overlap there. So one of the applications of this is to maybe this community college should put together a different program that takes parts of both of these and creates a new one that is more focused and more economical, both in terms of time and money for the students. So this is how that works. And Bev, you're keeping track of time? Okay, good. All right. So the question is, how does this alignment work? And from a research perspective, there really are two approaches that have been used to automate or semi-automate the alignment between a set of skills and curriculum. So one of those, which I will call the standard approach, is essentially to create a list of skills, you have that, and to represent the curriculum by a list of you could call them outcomes, you could call them skills, you could call them learning objectives, by some list of things that represents these and try to match them up. And this is, in fact, the way that most things have worked traditionally, and both in industrial and also academic applications. And there's some problems with this. One is that it loses information, and in particular, skills and competencies are very difficult to match up when they're devoid of context. What job are they in, for how long, what level, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's also another problem, which is that these KSAs, the skills referenced, often come from different taxonomies. Chris Dede was talking about that on this last week, okay? And we don't have necessarily standard taxonomies. So then you get to the problem of how do you compare these taxonomies? And one method being used by, for example, somewhat by the Credential Engine and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is to try to build a master taxonomy. Another one that we've seen from years ago in the commercial world is just to compare keywords. And then the obvious, more sophisticated one is to use AI to make the comparisons. But once you have that kind of AI, then you might as well do something a little bit different, which is this kind of newer approach, which is based on language and domain understanding that modern AI can exhibit. So what we do actually in SkillSync is we directly compare the desired skills to the course materials, to things like titles, descriptions, syllabi, if we can get them, etc. And the idea there is that this is what you would do. This is what you as a person would do. You would say, I need a course that teaches project management at such a level, or that teaches math at such a level. And I would look at the materials and I go, oh yeah, I know about that. That's from such and such a college. And it says it teaches business skills, but I know by reading the rest of this description that it's really talking about project management skills. And that's what I want, or that it isn't talking about what it says it is, etc. And you can put that into context. So this is what humans do, but the problem is that this requires AI that can understand these skills and their context as well. And it turns out that the off-the-shelf packages like BERT and SentenceBERT and so forth don't really work as is. You have to make some modifications to that. So what we've done is we've created our own underlying AI that's behind these services. And this underlying AI is built. I'm not going to go into the great detail here, but essentially what we're doing is we're incorporating world models. We're using some off-the-shelf stuff like BERT and GPT-2, not 3 because we're stick in the open source world, and we're feeding into this sort of high probability and high frequency multi-word expressions within a given domain. So we're altering these things, and there's sometimes it's a form of few shot alteration, etc. And then we're also building some transformers that are tuned to produce some specific kinds of scores. Okay, and I'll get to that in a minute. And what we then do is we take these scores that are produced by these various models, we wrap that in an algorithm that takes, for example, the skills priority into account. So there are skills that are critical. If you're thinking about, an airline pilot, there's skills that, being able to see, for example, having good sight is probably a very important ability. There's other ones that are important. Being able to speak English is important, but being able to speak it at a native speaker level is probably not. So there's and then there's things that are nice to have, like being able to speak nicely to the passengers or whatever. And you can, maybe that's not a great example, but you get the idea. And so these are all then weighted, and they produce this kind of alignment score that gets fed into this service. Okay, so this is kind of some of the underlying AI, and the kinds of measures that we're using. I've mentioned that we're tuning these transformers. We look at a couple different measures right now. These are some of them. So we're looking at, is the skill statement that we're feeding in, is this advanced or the same level or less advanced than the course involved? So we've trained something to make that decision. We had a bunch of interns label these things. So this is we use a lot of label data. Is the scope the same? Is it is the context the same? So for example, one of the scores just measures is this in the same domain? So one thing could be coffee making, and the other thing could be food services, and they have nothing to do with each other, but they're in the same general domain. And and one of them could be communication skills in the transportation industry, and the other could be communication skills, the same skills in the automotive, different industry, and they're just not in the same domain. So we look at that, and these are the kinds of scores that go into this algorithm. Underlying this, by the way, I know you talked about this earlier, and I couldn't be there, but I just wanted to mention that there's a lot of stuff we're doing with bias reduction, because bias is particularly a problem in the job space. There's a lot of gender association with roles, with words, racial associations as well. And so we've looked along the entire training process where we're doing this, starting with labelers, trying to find a diverse group of labelers themselves, to various kinds of replacement language. So we would replace a pronoun like he with they, for example, and to try and de-bias things in various ways. There's stuff in the literature on that. It's still a very important area, but we are very concerned with this in the underlying models, in the belief that will, if we don't do that, those kinds of biases will come out in the skills and in the matching. Okay, so finally, this thing is on personalized learning, and I'm going back to things that I know are near and dear to many of you here, who have been in the intelligent tutoring system world. And so I'm going to talk, just going to end by talking a little bit about, what does this really mean for the idea of personalized learning, especially in the workforce area. For those of you who are not in this world, when we talk about these intelligent tutoring systems, and there's kind of a standard model in which there's an inner loop that is a sort of micro adaptation that does the actual interactions with the students, and that then adjusts itself in sort of as a one-on-one tutor might do, in order to adapt and to what student answers and give hints. And there's a lot of different ways that this is done. And then there's a so-called outer loop that we can think of as selecting the next thing that's going to be taught. It could be at a task level or so forth. Now, when we're dealing with adult learning, these loops become a lot larger in size. They're not quite as micro, and in workforce development. And so what I've sort of proposed here is that to think about this as an outer loop for professional preparation. And so this is kind of this idea that we have, and I'm not going to go into the standard model of intelligent tutoring and adaptive learning systems, but we have a learner model. There's kind of an outer loop that's doing some sort of AI-based selection. There's labor market data coming in. And instead of thinking of a learner model, I think we should start thinking about a professional model. So, or rather an expert model, we should start thinking about a professional model. So this is what we want. And we do some sort of gap analysis, there's training opportunities, et cetera. And so essentially, if you think about this whole loop, which is the sort of professional development loop, there's some things we can do with AI, and there's a lot of research that I think can be done that would be of interest to, in this kind of convergence accelerator area. So one of them is how do we really do selection of what people should be studying, and what upskilling opportunities make sense. We have to date in our group focused on skills, but that's not the whole story. There's a lot more. There's prerequisites, there's cost, there's duration, there's context, there's location, there's a lot of other things, and we really need to start including those in our models. But the real challenge is, and this is just a very practical thing, is how do you take this Wild West world of skill frameworks and skills and knowledge and ability that are at multiple levels of granularity, expressed in different ways, et cetera, and how do you get that and make them into something that we have a common language about? And this, going back to Chris, and I think you're online, Chris, this was the point that I think was one of the points that was being made, is that we need this, whatever kind of research it is, we need to agree on what these things are and how to express them, et cetera. And of course, bias is still very much an issue. Okay, so with that, I will end as sort of suggestions to open up some discussions. I did put some references. I know somebody asked for some in the slides. There's some write-ups here of SkillSync itself. There's also some things about skills frameworks and talent pipeline. And there's also one thing in here, which is this standard that's actually now a standard. It's about to be published, which is IEEE. It's been approved. It hasn't been published yet, so it's kind of in that limbo. 1484.20.2 standards. People talk in numbers, not in words. But this is a recommended practice for defining competencies that was put together by a lot of people from the industry, not engineers, for the most part, people that are involved in competency and skills-based education and workforce development, and that talks about the right way to define skills. And I think that that's an important thing to point out as well. Okay, and with that, I will turn things back over to you, Beth.
Great, thank you. That was terrific. You asked a lot of important questions and the right questions, and told us how to express these things. This is wonderful.